Welcome to the Frequency Ma podcast with Sheena Israel and Alyssa Ma. Frequency Ma is a sanctuary for the oracular and the ordinary. We explore the interwoven paths of mothering, embodied business and prosperity, self-creation and relationship, spiritual technologies like channeling and frequency keeping. Expect earth and insights to catalyze your quantum leaps. For the multi-dimensional, multi-passionates, all of you is welcome here. Journey with us.
Today we are joined by the buoyant Brooke of Musical Breathwork. And Brooke is a gifted educator who illuminates the powerful connection between our brain, our breath, our body. She has over a decade of experience as a breathwork facilitator. She's a co-founder of a natural health center, and she's supported thousands of people to heal through her courses like the brain and the breath connection and her fascia flow sequence. And she's really at the emergent edge of integrating science, art, and wellness. It's just like a fascinating, enlivening combination. And she's a true multi-hyphenate. She draws on her experience as an elite level Division I collegiate athlete. She's a professionally trained singer, recording musician, and she's also a voice coach. And her personal delight in the rhythms of the natural world through practices like beekeeping, gardening, electroculture, worm farming, really shine through in her multidimensional teachings. And we're so excited to dive in with her today. Thank you for being here, Brooke.
Honor and a privilege. Thanks for having me, Alyssa and Sheena.
Yeah. So I think, in the past in this space, we've talked about the fascia as this plasmic conductor of liquid light. And I'm curious to explore the relationship of the fascia with the nervous system, with breath, and with the quantum realm. I know that's kind of a loaded question, but I think it would behoove us to kind of, spiral in by just talking about, what is the fascia?
So the fascia is a triple helix collagen fiber, and it's been explained awfully by doctors as a saran wrap of the body. And when we really look at the fascia, it's actually these tiny little hoses. So the triple helix shape itself holds a straw. So if you think of one straw, when you bend that one straw, it's like very pliable. And if we were moving a fluid through that straw and we kinked it, there would be a little bit of lapse within that flow of the fluid, right? And this is what's happening through the body. So the fascia is a triple helix collagen fiber that's holding all of our bones, muscles, tissues, ligaments, and our nervous system in place. And even though it was called the saran wrap, and there's a lot of therapists out there that refer to the myofascia, the fascia before was looked at like it only covered the muscle. But what they're finding now with the fascia conference and with work like Dr. Carla Stecco is that the fascia is actually moving into every cell through something called integrins. And this is the reason why we're seeing cold plunging becoming so popular in America, is because the mitochondria within the cell start to divide. Your brown adipose tissue start to increase when you're doing cold plunging, but that's all happening through the fascia system. So the fascia is helping these mitochondria divide, and it allows your body to burn more fat and glucose. But this is all happening through the fascia. And the main indicator that I love about it is that we can really start to see the body as gases and fluids moving through these nanotubules. Like we are made of mostly air and gas, but this air and gas is held inside of a shape and a structure, and that shape and structure is really built by the fascia. And these fascia, when we're children, these little hoses are moving the fluids through it and around it perfectly. Everything is gliding. There's fluidity, there's flow, there's nothing impinged, there's nothing stuck. Now, as we damage ourselves, as we become chronically dehydrated, as we become chronically stressed, as we train linearly, like most of the gym equipment that we have, we're walking in one direction, we're going upstairs in one direction. Many of the motions that we currently have in training teach our fascia to work in kind of one direction. And when we start to look at the flow of the fluids, we see that, wow, the mobility of our hips are a 360-degree joint. Everything needs to be moved around it. So when I work with clients, by the time they're 25, there's often the same issues over and over. And it's because our training isn't thinking of the fascia, it's thinking of the muscles. And as we expose ourselves to the concept of fascia, there are spaces in our body where there's just a few little straws, like it's malleable and it's almost luminescent when you look at it in a real, like in a living being. It's almost silver, it's fluid, it's liquid light, really is a great term for it. And this liquid light is moving through a spider web. And this spider web in some areas is very shallow, like the fascia under our cheek. And if you actually put your tongue on the side of your mouth, the cheek is made of a lot of collagen, and your saliva in your mouth is made of a lot of hyaluronic acid mixed with some enzymes and things. Now, hyaluronic acid is the fluid that moves between the fascia bands. The cool thing about hyaluronic acid is it is a water molecule. It's an acid molecule that's housing water. It actually holds 1,600 water molecules. And water, remember, is H2O. So there's twice as many hydrogen atoms in water than oxygen atoms. So this hyaluronic acid is moving this electrostatic fluid of hydrogen through the body. And the interesting thing about hydrogen is it's moving because it is electrostatic. I have two magnets here. I'm going to show you in the video. When we have two negative charges facing each other, there's this little repulsion mechanism. And this is actually how the fluids through the fascia are moving. So if you just put two negatives together, you can feel that resistance, that gauge charge of the magnets moving. And that's how our body's moving these fluids. So as long as there's no impingements in the fascia, we experience flow. And as children, we could jump out of a tree really high and we would just become like liquid in the middle of the air, and we're spring loaded and shock absorbing. And if we were taught how to condition our fascia as children, and the way that I teach it is similar to brushing our hair. We brush our hair on a daily basis to make sure it's knotted. We brush our teeth on a daily basis to make sure there's nothing stuck. Our fascia requires the same kind of regular maintenance in order to keep moving these electrostatic charges. And when we reestablish that flow in people, there's a lot of things that happen electrically to them. So the mechanoreceptors, right? Our brain communicates to our body through the nervous system. That nervous system is held in place by the scaffolding of the fascia. And the nervous system hates being in pain. If we're in pain, if we have chronic tension in areas, it'll tell us for about a couple weeks, and then it will go dull. It won't bother you with pain if it doesn't need to. And when we start to create this fascia flow by brushing out the fascia strategically from the ground up, and we follow 8 rules in my sequence, and those 8 rules work with the grain of the fascia. We work with the hydrating concept of we want the fascia to create more hyaluronic acid. When we work with it, it's gentle. And over time, we end up pulling that mud out of the body. We pull and any of these stuck, dull areas out. Any of the kinks in those straws get kind of brushed away and out of the system. And now, when our nervous system ends at our skin, it ends 4 different ways. We have 4 different kind of mechanoreceptors that acts as the interface between our body and our brain. And these mechanoreceptors, there's a number of them. They help us determine like what the temperature of the room is. If we, step on a splinter, it's that electrical current that will never let you forget until that splinter is out of your foot. If you step in something wet, it's those mechanoreceptors that say, "Ooh, what was that? That was highly questionable." But these mechanoreceptors start to turn back online. And when our nervous system turns back online through our body, we actually experience our electromagnetic frequency getting bigger. So if we looked at ourselves more like an electrical current, that's moving through these spheres of the brain, breath, and body, right? This flow, this rhythm established between the 3. When the body turns fully back online and we reestablish the flow that we had as children, our magnetic frequency becomes more powerful because now there's no holes in this holographic chink. And it's fascinating to watch with clients that do the fascia and the breath at the same time because we're creating so much more flow where there was stagnation. that dreams come back that they didn't used to have, that psychic abilities that they had as children start to come back online. So the fascia, it's moving this electrostatic current, and it's really important to our joint health. It's really important to the biomechanics of the body. It's really important to how we feel and how spring-loaded the body feels. But there is another component that I'm just watching happening in my clients and in myself, where I'm like, wow, there is this other thing that lights up when the brain feels fully connected to the body again and the breath is established, the brain waves change. And when we are more in control of our brain waves, there is a slew of things that start to happen in the body.
Wow, I love how you're talking about to help people's like psychic abilities kind of come back on. I'm glad that you touched on that because throughout this whole sequence of conversation, I was just feeling so much love for you being here because this is like the beginning. What we just began with is exactly why I felt just so excited to have you here. My own personal experience with my channel is very, very somatic. And I've gone through the process of testing and exploring this and working with others to help them tune into how their channel works and how they can, touch into their Akashic records or, feel spirit from a plant or something like that. And I feel that the way that it works through me is through the body. And of course, that's not true for everyone, like immediately, right? Maybe some people just hear or see or whatever it is, but there is a subtlety in the somatic expression of energy through us. And when I tune into what that is, I drop in with the visuals, I see it moving through me as if there's before I knew the word fascia, right? That is how I see it. I see it like this liquid light of energy just moving through my body, and it's carrying information directly where it needs to go, whether it's to an organ or directly to my brain or whatever that is. It carries this information, and then I have the ability to opt into receiving that information, like through my conscious mind, and then communicating that, or just be it with it. But it's just kind of this beautiful, beautiful truth that our body is an instrument and is the master tool of reality. And I just love that we went there directly. Yeah.
Curious too. I love that you mentioned, that we have this historical focus on the musculature and the skeletal system in our kind of fitness worlds, as well as like in our, what we might consider more holistic uh, realms of like yoga and conscious movement. And, it really feels to me like there is such an invitation to this foundational shift into understanding the fascia. Is it fascia or fascia? Am I like bougieing it up? Like,
It actually depends on who you listen to, because the fascia is being studied by the Chinese and the Germans and the Americans simultaneously. You can hear it said differently. And even in the research articles, half of them call where the fascia gets stuck densifications.
okay.
And they're referring to the fluid between the fascia being stuck. So it's dense, like the
Yeah.
hyaluronic acid is stuck and it's dense, and that's how it looks on an ultrasound. When you read the other half of the research science, they call it adhesions, meaning
Yeah.
the fascia bands have glued themselves together and they're adhered. So you can call it fascia, you can call it fascia. Um, some people are still calling it the connective tissue of the body. Uh, so whatever floats your boat, the vocabulary in medical science around the fascia is so not determined yet. And I actually see it as the system that's going to bridge
Yeah.
Eastern medicine and Western medicine, because there's this disagreement in science about what the fluid inside of the fascia is. So there's German doctors that are saying this must be the lymphatic system. That's the fluid that's moving through it. Then the Chinese doctors are saying, no, this is the chi force. And they've been studying Kung Fu and Taekwondo masters and measuring how the fascia is like this this light, this liquid plasma moving through the fascia. And then in America, it just depends on who you listen to. But Dr. Catherine Clinton is all about, this is the plasma connection. This is how the electrons are moving through the body. This is the quantum, and this is the system that's moving the quantum through. So there's really not a lot of verbiage, which is, I think, why many doctors are still not sure how to talk about it, because there's still so much studying happening. In 2018, Dr. Carla Stecco found a new cell within fascia, and that really prompted a lot of questions. So right now in the medical community, fascia is greeted with just unending questions, and a handful of research teams around the world that are trying to dive into those. Many of the fascia research it's being looked at, with allopathic implications. How can, there's a current study going on in China where they're taking nanoparticles and trying to move them through the fascia system in order to basically give radioactive fluid in order to measure where it is and how it looks. So to me, it's, a lot of the research is still a little off base. Like, I'm not really interested in studying like how nano things move through it. I'm more into, how do we create healthy fascia flow? How can we maintain healthy fascia flow? What's the fastest and most efficient way through without surgery? And then how can we recover the fascia without ripping any of the fascia? And, for the last 100 years, most of the fascia release techniques have come from Dr. Ida Rolf's mechanisms that she invented in the late 18th century, early 19th century, which is find the stuckness, remove the stuckness. And it's like distilled most simple form. And my question has been, if we have a cell within the fascia called the fibrocyte that can recreate this hyaluronic acid, how can we just use that acid to create the flow again without ripping any of the fascia fibers? And it's more like looking at the geometry of a spider web and saying, if you have knots in a spider web, unknot the knots without messing with the rest of the spider web. And I feel like my sequence has done a really great job at finding the solution to that, where it's gentle, and it takes longer, like you can go into a rolfing session and have your body beat up and feel like you've made a lot of headway, but you're going to be bruised. You're not going to be able to train for a while. Whereas in my technique, we're creating that flow, but there's no ripping, there's no tearing, there's no bruising. So it's just different approaches. I feel like we're getting better and we're getting closer, but yeah, to even say the word fascia versus fascia, it's just depends on where you look at it, what part of the world.
It just feels like an incredibly foundational shift to like when we start to view our own bodies and we experience something that's painful, and we're immediately referring to, because we've so integrated this paradigm of like viewing the body as just muscles, and the fascia is like something that's just kind of auxiliary. So I feel like when we supplant that view of the human body and we're really foundationally understanding the emergent way that the fascia creates the experience of the biological quantum human, that it allows us access to spontaneous healing. It allows us access to, immediate, coming online with our telepathy, all of these kind of extrasensory abilities that become more accessible when in our kind of, just daily practices, we're trying to, move through pain. We're relating to that through an understanding of the fascia, which I'm so excited to just continue to bask in all of your codes around, like the actual makeup of this, fascinating aspect of our humanity. And where do we want to take this next, Sheena? There's so much else. Or do you have something?
I kind of wanted to mention the fact that like most people are under the impression that the muscles are holding the skeleton in place, but there's not a single spot in the body where muscle connects to bone. Muscle connects to tendons and joints, right? Or tendons, and those tendons are all anchored onto the bone system through fascia. So fascia really started to get introduced to American culture in the 1980s. Dr. Stephen Levin was the first one that looked at an architectural concept called tensegrity, which is tension and integrity. And it's a floating cable system. There's a sculptor artist I really love, and he was really the founder and the birther of what we call floating compression or tensegrity. And his name is Kenneth Snelson, and his sculptures are, they take these giant joints and then they float them with tension cables. And all these tension cables are interconnected. They're really woven together. But none of the main bars hold themselves, similar to the skeleton. So the skeleton, you know, there's no bone on bone anywhere, hopefully. It's all bones floating together that create the structure. And as a golfer, I was taught how to swing from the ground up. So like all my power as 100-foot woman, or 100-foot, I'm 5 foot and I'm 100 pounds, and I wanted to hit the ball 250 yards. And there was an inventor that created the PEDAR system. He's created a bunch of things that I had the privilege of working with as a kid. And he showed me that there's an equation. If I want to hit the ball 250 yards, that I have to build the momentum of 250 pounds of pressure from my left foot. So I trained acrobatically in order to create more pressure on my feet than my body weight. So for me, it was the goal of creating 150% more body weight on my front left foot before I let go of my arms. And equations like this have just like lived rent free in my brain. And as I look at the brain waves and the breath rate and the fascia tension, I'm starting to see an equation. And this equation being the fascia must flow from the ground up. When we look at the skeleton system, so many of us are focused on pain in our neck and our shoulders, our hips and our knees. And what I keep seeing over and over is the same golf sequence. It's all from the ground. We have 26 bones in our foot. Our foot is so much more complex than the rest of the body. Our foot and our hands really are like the ends of these major fascia bands. So many people that are struggling with TMJ, tension headaches, upper neck issues, back issues, low back issues, what I'm noticing is that their lateral band down the lower body is so extremely tight. Their hamstring, where the hamstring touches the glute, may be so collapsed that it hasn't been opened up all the way. And these things are tugging and pulling at the upper body because the body needs to create balance. So the sequence of moving with the fascia, which is different than some of the somatic stuff, which is, you know, moving and opening the spine, which is very healthy for us. But there tends to be deep structural healing and deep joint healing that happens when we start from the ground up, from our toes upward. Because when we look at a tensegrity sculpture, when you make a tensegrity piece, it's basically you're playing with sacred geometry and then pulling the sacred geometry apart, and then you have to float it. But the main things you have to set is the base. Until you set the base, there's nothing you can do up top. So I like to take that philosophy into the body and be like, wow, you know, when we brush our hair, if you have a knot in the middle, you never start at the top because you're going to rip everything. You start at the bottom. So there's all these perfect metaphors of, wow, we should be really looking at the fascia and treating it and making it flow from the ground up. So those are my little notes on it. The fascia is just an incredible shaping tissue. It's our sculpture. It's what holds our real shape.
Yeah, I love that too. I shared with you on another call, right, that I was just kind of one of those, you know, weirdos that was wearing the five-fingered shoes like in early 2000s, right? Walking around a very like fashion forward, hip centric city of San Francisco, but it's so hilly. Everywhere you go is a hike. There's nothing flat there. So I was in a collision when I was 15. And I fractured my spine in 6 places. And that created, like, yoga was really great for me, but it still had a lot of stiffness. And just one day it was like, you know, when I'm barefoot, I feel better. And when I work with my toes, like really massaging them, and when I practice, like give myself like reflexology in my feet, I feel better for hours. And so I just was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to wear these shoes. And yes, it was an adjustment, But within a matter of weeks, I started to notice, my feet were so much stronger, my ankles were stronger, then my knees stopped hurting, then my hips stopped hurting, and my spine all the way up. Everything was corrected within a few months. And that's all I did. I didn't change anything. I just wore different shoes. That's it.
Simple solutions, girlfriend. I love that. I love
Mhm.
that you've experienced that in your body as well. It's a beautiful thing when we start to see the body as an interconnected unit. We don't have knee pain. We have a consequence of tension being out of alignment in every step we take. So how do we just bring it back into alignment? And how can we create more synovial fluid? So this hyaluronic acid that I mentioned before, it's in our tears. Like our tears are mostly hyaluronic acid. It's the saliva mixed with some enzymes. The fluid that comes out of us when we're turned on, that's hyaluronic acid mixed with some stuff. The joints that we have, that synovial fluid, is super dense hyaluronic acid. And they used to say that by the time we turn 30, our collagen is going to be lower. This hyaluronic acid is going to be lower. We need to supplement it. And what I'm finding is like, actually the body makes it. We just have to work with the body to turn it back on. If we don't train or condition it, of course it's going to go away. Same as if I didn't brush my hair. It would be normal and natural for my hair to become knotted. And we forget like how far we've come. 1938 was the first nylon toothbrush. 1938. It hasn't even been 100 years, and almost everyone around the world understands we should brush our teeth twice a day. So I feel very much like that person in this day and age. I'm holding a tennis ball and I'm like, hi, welcome. This is your fascia. You need to brush it. And it would be really nice to see if my sequence, can outlive me long and into the future, just like the original toothbrush person that was walking around in the 1700s going, this is good for our brain. Please brush your teeth.
I love the
Is
connection to
there,
hair so
go
much.
ahead,
I was just gonna say that. I just love the
the
connection to
connection.
hair so much, especially because my hair is like extremely knotted. So every time you mention it, I'm like, oh, my hair. But it really does, when I don't brush my hair, there is a constriction in my ability to connect to the subtle realms. Like it's a very distinct experience. And when I do take the time to brush out my hair, to braid it, this is something I do with my daughter, is every night we brush her hair out and we do a braid, and I'm braiding in her dreams. And it's so crucial to do that in order to experience that harmony. And so it really is just landing for me, that connection with the fascia, and like the daily just brushing it out versus other methods, which are really like the torquing and the maybe more going to the source of the pain and trying to remove it directly versus working systemically to create harmony in the whole system from the feet up. It just makes so much sense to me. So
We're
I'm
radio
excited.
towers, we really are radio towers. So if we want to experience the higher realms of brainwaves, which is really the work that I see you two ladies doing, if we can get people's radio towers connected to the earth and flowing, the brain is going to have a way larger capacity to hold voltage. So if you ladies are channeling and you're blipping into these 60 hertz, 80 hertz states of consciousness, it's difficult for the body to move that voltage through the nervous system, right? And this nervous system is held by the fascia. So if there's impingements in the fascia that have collapsed over your nerves, that's what we experience as neuropathy. There's a lot of different indicators for neuropathy, but that's one of the few that I have seen. And when we have a flow in the fascia and the body's connected to the earth and then the breath is mighty, what I find is like we're going to have to be able to hold these frequencies longer and better. That's my theory. That's the theory I'm rolling with. And I'm making an album right now all about adding cymatics to that, to a slow breath rate with a flowing fascia, with the intent of hooking people up to the sounds and then reading their brainwaves, because I really feel like there's a sequence. I just need to find the right time signature and the right rhythms in order to hold it and maintain it.
Fascinating.
Can you speak to the gentleness that might be required for the fascia? And as we are working through those adhesions or density or whatever we want to call that. I've gone through like just your sequence with the fascia and the tennis ball. And I have to say that in my personality is like, let's get to it, right? And you spoke, the instruction was like 80% pain, go slow. You're not even offering the upper body yet, right? It's just you start with the lower body. And after just the first time doing it, yeah, I wanted to play with the tennis ball and like go to the upper body. I was like, oh, I'm getting this. I want to do that. And I didn't. And I listened because I trusted you. Right. And the next day I felt, I truly felt that I had like worked out, like trained it so like internally in a way that I hadn't felt in a long time. And none of that sequence was very painful for me. I didn't have a lot of like really tender spots, but
Right.
it was still really, really potent. And in my experience with working with the fascia and channeling, and I understand that there is this idea that we do need to be gentle, that the body does need to feel safe in receiving these high voltages of like energy, as you call it. But how we allow the body to feel safe is not just in our mind, right? It's as you say, it's in our breath, and it's in the fascia. I believe that because that's my experience. And so I love to for you to like talk on the gentleness of your approach.
So in the sequence, there's 8 rules that we follow, and those 8 rules all very specifically serve a purpose. About turning on the piezoelectric charge, about reattaching the brain to these spots. I'm so happy that you respected the rule, because I jumped ahead in my own volition when I was in the beginning of this process and experimented with what I know of as an adhesion in my upper body. I've lifted a golf bag on one shoulder 10,000 times, not the other shoulder. So I have this chronic thing. And I took care of that. I got rid of it with my sequence, right? Amazing. I couldn't turn my neck for 2 weeks because the adhesion in my upper neck was actually being caused from what was happening in my lower body. So thank you for following the rules, because you end up kind of hurting yourself. The upper body is so easy to manipulate compared to the lower body, because the major fascia bands, we have 9 major fascia bands, not including the arms that roll from the feet to the top of the head, right? I'm sorry, including the arms, we have 9. And these I look at as the major strings of the body. So in certain areas of the body, the collagen fiber is like very shallow. In other places, it's like an industrial strength rubber band, like a super strong spider web. And when you'll find, as you continue to get deeper into the meat lasagna layers of the fascia, by the time that you're taking care of the deep layers in the glute and in the hip, whatever's happening in the upper body normally recalibrates. So people that have access to my course, I have the upper body on a timed release. And it's like, this is when you know you're ready. And it's usually 6 to 8 months. And in that time, so much of the upper body just rebalances by itself. When you play a guitar, you're only tuning one side, you're not tuning the both, So like as we tune the feet up, every time you take a step, we actually have the ability to reshape what's happening in the upper body. So with time and with consistency, the spine actually kind of self-corrects, because those hips, if the hips are dropped because of lower body tension, the upper body is going to create a slew of symptoms. So by the time the hips get completely balanced, the upper body, now we're just dealing with scar damage. We're dealing with modified issues that you had maybe as a car accident or maybe as a hand injury. So I have people that send me emails. They're like, I think I'm ready. And I send them the protocol. I'm like, okay, well, pass my little quiz. And they're like, okay, I'm not ready yet. You're right. But that's why it's so nice to have an established vocabulary around the feelings inside of the body, because we are turning on those dull spots. So thank you for following the sequence. You did a good job. But there is things that come up for people in the fascia. Fascia is usually associated with a lot of trauma work. And what I see often in those things is people having giant releases that other people have to hold space for. And really, my work is tailored to not remove the therapist, but like give people another tool so that they don't have to spend $1,000 getting their body retuned in 1 week by a therapist that may or may not follow a sequence. So The gentle approach comes from the fact that we can hold the space that we need as anything comes out of the body. And I have this, maybe it's a little unempathic, but I love to look at trauma as the Cheeto dust of the body. Like we all go through trauma. Everything in nature goes through trauma. Trauma is how we get mightier. And I was with a friend last night and he told me this story about his mom accidentally baking his hermit crab when he was 8 years old. And he was laughing about it as an adult. It was a simple accident. It was just a combination of things that happened that was just, in hindsight, funny, but in that moment, incredibly traumatizing for an 8-year-old. He picks it up. He's like, hey, Terminator. And then it's just dust particles that come out. And here he is 20 years later laughing about it because it was an accident. Life goes on. There is this, transformation that happens. So I look at stuck trauma in the body like Cheeto dust. Like it's stuff that got stuck in between our teeth. We don't have to analyze it. All we have to do is get it out. We just have to flow. Many of us have, I believe that we've all lived many lifetimes. And this lifetime is chill. No matter what trauma we've experienced in this lifetime, it's 10 times better than like the plague and the wars. And like, imagine being the person there after the plague hit and you're like the one person in a good mood and you're like, okay, guys, like let's pull all the dead bodies out and put them in a pile. Like time to reestablish bartership. Like the tomatoes are popping. We got to get moving on Earth again. Like whatever trauma our ancestors went through is significantly greater than like what we're experiencing now. So, and that's not to say we don't have real traumas, but traumas become growth. They become lessons when we've integrated them. And when we move the flow, when we reestablish the flow, we have the ability to see that trauma in a different light. And it's often, to be a champion in life. Most people die in their victim. So when people work with the fascia, I really steer as far away as possible from the trauma conversation because it's like you have all the tools. Everything you need is within you. All we need to do is be gentle with whatever Cheeto dust has gotten stuck. So if we're hitting spots that bringing up, old memories, things that were very painful, we just breathe and we're gentle with it. We don't try to take it all out at once. We're untying a knot in a spider web. We want to create a lot of conditioner around it. So if you have a really heavy duty dread in your hair, right, you're not just going to stab it with a comb. You're going to add some slippery elm root. You're going to add some detangler fluid. And that's what we do during the fascia sequence is we find those traumas and we trauma, meaning the fascia has been stuck. The Cheeto dust hath been stuck in the body. But as massaging that open and we create the flow, our relationship to those moments shift. And it's through the gentleness, it's through the consistency, it's through breathing deeply and just sitting with it and honoring the sequence. The sequence always gets us through stress and pressure. So as an athlete and as a musician, you go through a sequence when you arrive at a venue and you have to unload all your instruments and then you have to plug all your instruments in, then you have to sound check it, then you have to go back and then warm up your voice. There's a sequence to prepare yourself for moments. And when we are creating flow in bodies that were 50% stagnant, there's going to be a lot of change. And the sequence will help that person change without me being right next to them saying, you can do this. You don't have to scream and yell, you can. Often, some people love to verbalize whatever's happening within, but really we have all the tools we need to unstick the Cheeto dust and create flow. We're meant to be healthy. We're not meant to hold on to deep traumas, but man, when we start to explore the fascia in our hips and in our glutes and our quads, it is very easy to be like, ooh, I have things here. This is where there was no flow. So I mean, many of us women are walking around with these big, beautiful butts and these big, beautiful wide hips. And when we start to palpate those tissues 3-4 inches in, there's so many things that come up for people. And just understanding that in time and in consistency and with the sequence, we're going to remove those, but you have everything that you need.
I love this idea that we can meet our traumas at a frequency level without creating these stories that kind of scaffold on one another and take us further out of the body and further out of harmony. And that there's a way that we can, meet ourselves at this somatic level and move into harmony through just attending what is there. And through this very accessible sequence, by the way, I want to mention that your sequence is like 20 minutes, something that you can do while you're listening to a podcast or, watching a television show. So I love that, it is gentle, it takes time, but it's also very accessible. We're all, pulled in a million directions, and like it's easy to prioritize 20 minutes of foundational change that's going to impact not only your emotional well-being, your physical well-being, your spiritual connectivity, your relationships. I mean, there's just, yeah, an incredible array of benefit from this.
I'm all about efficiency. There's
Mm.
so many things to do during the day. So I built the sequence that the way that I do it is I do my feet in the morning. While I brush my teeth, I take care of my left foot. While I make my coffee, I take care of my right foot. When I do my morning calls, I take care of my calves. And then before I go to bed, I do my upper legs. So what I tell people to do when they train is make sure that you take care of your lower legs, which is a 20-minute commitment 5 days a week. That fascia is pretty tense. It's difficult to get a few millimeters under the plantar fascia in the foot. And then the upper legs are so easy to do while you're watching a TV show. It's just give up the couch, lay on the floor for a little while, put your timer on. So people watch my sequence, but about a month in, they have it memorized. And if they're intelligent, it's even quicker than that, because as long as you're following the rules are going to work with you. And so thanks for saying that. Yeah, I tried to make it as efficient as possible. And even my mighty breathwork sequence, it's only 10 minutes. I wanted something that wasn't going to require 30 minutes a day of training. Just give me what I need so that my natural and automatic breath pattern is reducing, so that my lung field is growing, so that my lung field is staying clean. So the sequences are built for thought leaders, athletes, artists, people that are on the move, on the go, trying to be a champion of their life and don't need another thing to implement.
Love that.
I'd love to flow into, I think if we get into voice, we'll hit breath as well.
Yeah.
But it's so fascinating to me that you are a vocal artist and a musician. And, one of the accessible practices that has transformed my life is the practice of mantra, and um, also just like short meditations, short breathing meditations. And it's so easy to quickly shift your brain state, to shift your level of consciousness in a busy environment. I've pulled my car over onto the side of the road and done a quick meditation. And so I'm curious how you work with both uh, the breath and sound as a way to calibrate this instrument of self, and to, yeah,
Oh,
invite us into different states.
okay. Let's geek out actually for a bit, because so the breath that I teach comes from like classical opera training. And in opera training, so opera singers don't use a mic. They're unamplified singing over a symphony to 4,000 people. So in opera, your voice has to be piercing and resonant over 108 instruments in the pit. And to do that, you basically have to, I call it striking a pure note. So like in golf, what we all get addicted to is the pure shot. It's where there's like effortlessness, you have maximum power. It's one of the most addictive feelings in all of athletics. And I feel like every golfer that we call it the bug, you get infected because you had one pure golf swing and you're like, that was a drug. Give me that. That's how I feel about opera singing. When you touch that lightning bolt of your chest is resonating, you've traveled through the passaggio and the whole head is open, your voice is explosive. It's not just sound from your mouth, it's sound from your entire being. And I have the privilege, I like low-key, I want to say like I seduced her. I like seduced this amazing opera singer to give me lessons. I was like, please, I'm your biggest fan. She plays the queen, Hilary Ginther. She plays the queen in all of these operas like around the world. And she's like maybe the one opera singer that smokes weed. So I was like, you're my girl. And she is teaching me even more stuff about the breath. Here I thought I was so good, and she's pulling me even deeper into the body. But in opera, this is what I want to say before we geek out about the physiology. When you shape the breath, right? Because you're traveling the vibration of your sound, which is just two little drum flaps in your vocal cords, right? So hitting a pure note is when these little drum flaps of the vocal cords are perfectly symmetrical. right? And then you have powerful breath moving through it, and breath that you have control, valve pressure control. So when I teach the breath, I teach a shape. So when we look at the physiology of the lung field, we only have like 30% lung field on the top, like in our upper chest, and most of it is on our bottom. So as a singer, if you do this with me, you inhale through the nose, fill your belly all the way up. Okay, keep the air in your belly. I want you to inhale more and fill your back. Keep the air there. Inhale more, fill your sides. Keep the air there. Inhale more, fill your chest. All right, now from this position, you're gonna almost feel like a ballet dancer if you put your arms out, like you're like winged out in your shoulder blades a little bit. Now, when you exhale, you're gonna exhale from the chest, keep the belly out. Then exhale from your sides, keep the belly out. Exhale down the back, keep the belly out still. Then at the very end, release the belly. So by controlling the intercostals, which are the muscles through the rib cage, and the diaphragm separately, instead of just expansion, contraction, we actually teach I teach a Fibonacci spiral through it. And what we're doing is we're pushing the air against the diaphragm. And the diaphragm, when you see it, it's a U-shaped muscle that has 3 ridges along it. So we actually have control of the diaphragm to go forward, out to the sides, and out to the back. And when we're using it properly, it actually drops all the way flat. And this puts huge pressure on our pelvic floor. It actually like moves all of our internal organs. So just by breathing properly, people that have pelvic floor issues and digestive issues, it often clears up because we're reestablishing massage within the internal organs. And as you push down on your airflow, you actually start to control the valve pressure. So your air pressure of sound, right? And so as opera singers, we can train with like, up to 80 pounds on your diaphragm. The diaphragm can be heavily strength trained. The intercostals we train to open and create more flexibility so that the lung field itself can hold more capacity. The standard untrained lung only holds 5 to 7 cubic liters of air. The world record holders are at 22 cubic liters of air. So we all have the capacity to double and triple our lung field. And when we do that, when we clean the lungs, when we expand your muscles around the lungs can just open up. And when you see the shape of the lungs, we all see the lungs as like these 2 little balloons, but they are super irregular, asymmetrical. The right lung field's way bigger than the left lung field because our heart's in the way. And we have these bronchial tubes that actually open up. So if you look at an inflated lung from the bottom, it's like it's like a hand with all these little like bulbousy fingers. And that's why our capacity can keep increasing. So as we just create flexibility in the upper body, the lungs can just keep opening. It's interesting when you get into the physiology of the lungs. Like the lungs are behind the rib cage, and the rib cage itself is just blocked off from everything else. So that diaphragm is a pump. And as the pump goes down, the lung field swells with blood, and then this blood cakes all of the lungs, and then the lungs open into the bloodstream, right? And then through the process of diffusion in these tiny, tiny, tiny little alveoli sacs, the oxygen is dropped into the blood and the carbon dioxide is taken up. And when I show people how tight the lung field, the lung tissue is to the intercostals, they start to realize, wow, when I'm opening my breath to the side, I'm actually expanding my lung tissue. So for every 1/4 inch of flexion that you gain on the sides of your body, your lung tissue actually unfurls. So many of us have been walking around and our lungs are like squished inside of our bodies and we're breathing shallowly. And if we were to translate that to an instrument, right, the instrument would be barely making any noise. So as an opera singer, we train our capacity to be as big as humanly possible. And then from that state, we control the airflow as a shape so that we can maintain a big, boisterous voice. And then from there, it gets really Star Wars-y. Are you ready for that?
Yes.
Okay. So we're controlling air, right? Air is that like unseen pressure that we can feel. And this air is going to flow through the vocal cords. Now, when we start to add sound to the exhale, these vocal cords vibrate. And all of the sound comes through the vocal cords, right? But we can resonate that sound off of empty chambers of the body. And we can experience this really easy in a stairwell. If you go to like the middle floor of a echoey stairwell and you start to make low notes and you just like, ooh, and then stop and listen, you'll feel the low frequencies coming off of the lower parts of the stairwell. Then if you hit your highest note, like dogs do this, when dogs are making that squeaky sound, like that sound's coming through their skull. And when you make loud, high frequency pitches in a stairwell, the notes will come off of the higher floors. And that's the same in our body. So we resonate the tone off of the empty chest chamber of the body, the empty like neck and throat of the body, and then the head. And in opera, the back of the head is called the dark side, and the front of the head is called the light side. And our job is to balance the tone between the light and the dark so that the sound is coming through the top of the head. Now, if you want to get real complicated, your job is to open the back doors to the darkness, which you can do if you can, either of you, if you can move your ears, that like little wiggly, I've been trying to teach myself for 3 weeks how to move my ears because I don't know how to do it. But our soft palate, yeah, if you can wiggle them up, that muscle is connected to your soft palate, which is the back of the throat. And when we do my breath sequence, I teach people how to hold and suction cup their tongue against the soft palate so that we actually train the nasal glands to open, and we're training the trachea to handle more air volume. But in opera, we lift that, and you can feel it if you like snort a little bit. You can feel that little wiggle in the back of your throat. So the trick with opera, right, is you have to have perfect posture. So you're like, your hips are tilted forward so that the back of your diaphragm's all the way open. Then when you inhale and you fill your whole body with the air, you lift your ears, or you like lift your soft palate so that the doors to the darkness are open. And then you throw the air through the top of your skull. That's like what you're aiming for. So if I do it right, like when I hit that pure note, the pure notes come off the center of the body, which is often how I teach people how to vocal train. I'm like, don't listen to yourself. You never hear yourself the way that you sound because your bones vibrate. So sing into a corner, but try to just feel. Pure notes come off the center of the body. All right. So if I'm doing it right, the center of my body is where the feeling is, and there's a pressure in my sternum and then a pressure at the top of my head. Now, the teacher that I'm working with, she's like, yeah, when you're doing it right, you just feel a giant beacon of pressure at your solar plexus, and that's shining out through the audience. And I'm like, okay, I still have more to learn because that's not where I'm at yet, but thank you for that visual understanding. So there's more, but when you're singing, you're using your whole body as a frequency emitter, so holding and moving the resonant tones through the body, to me, is just fascinating. It's like you're acting like a bee. You're trying to vibrate your whole person. And when you're vibrating your whole person, you have this piercing quality to like make your sound travel through space.
That's incredible. Like, oh, I love that this door's flung open to the darkness, and the like dropping into the low notes, and we have such a fear of, I think, going there in ourselves. For people like myself, I know Sheena's a trained singer, but I am not. Although I think this is an important conversation too, is like sound is for everyone. Sound is a human experience, and we don't often have, in our culture, the opportunity to gather around a campfire and sing and drum. But this is an experience, even if we're not trained opera singers, we can, integrate these lessons of like, how do we move sound through our body and, vibrate our, cellular being. And yeah, I love your description so much. I'm not trying to delight a crowd, but I am trying to like change my own consciousness through moving sound. I'm just, yeah, curious to
Please play with the expansion. Like there's so many singers out there right now that are whispering into the mics.
yeah.
Like they're barely singing. And it's like, come on, where's the strength? Like Sheena, you said it so good the other day about the disembodied. Like I watched some of these really beautiful singers that are coming out with like Celtic fairy options, like, albums and stuff. And I really want to like their music, but they're like a floating head. Like something about the sound feels too light and airy for me as a soul to like anchor onto and play as my battle cry. So it's like, oh, it's cute. Like that sounds so pretty, but there's some level of depth. And as singers, I sang folk forever. And I met a musician, Rustin Gross, and he was like, okay, that's cute, but like sing louder. And I was like, okay, well, like I thought I was singing loud, so what are you talking about? And to shake a room with your voice is a different way to experience your voice. And anybody that wants to sing, what I suggest doing is go shake a room with your voice. Lay on your back on the floor, breathe deeper than you ever have, and rocket your sound to the ceiling. And then when you think you're good at it, add a weight to your stomach and do it again and try to do it better and try to do it longer. Because when you just blow through your fear with loudness, everything shifts because the vibration in your body starts to really activate and the sound changes from what you're hearing, right, to what you're feeling. And when you can get into the feeling, the tension shapes you. So many people have a locked larynx. Like when they try to sing, they get in their head and they're like, "Oh God!" and then their larynx, and you can actually see it like lift. In point A opera singer, you have to like loosen your jaw, right? And then you do this little snorting, but you try not to snort, but because you're around other people and you're like, okay, how can I do this without snoring? Because I don't know how to move my ears. If you know how to move your ears, you can just move your ears back. But when you get into that space, if you feel that locking up happen, you're being too damn serious. It's about sound is meant for playing. We're meant to play with sound. Who gives a shit if it sounds ugly? Who cares? Rustin, he had a real breakthrough with me where he's like, who cares if it sounds ugly? Just shake the room. Make noise. Make it loud. Make it louder. Make it louder. Okay, now resonate deeper. And then something happens when you're making your loudest sound. And it doesn't matter. Vowels are A, E, I, O, U. It's like almost the same vowels across cultures. There's only 5 real shapes. Like colors, there's only 3 primary colors that make all color. There's really only 5 main vowels that make all language. So pick a vowel, any vowel that feels right, and get loud and try to experience the sound outside of your body and the feeling that you have on the inside of the body, and just get out of your head because the larynx will get locked up in fear. And when we're in fear singing, our consciousness is divided. We're no longer paying attention to what's happening. So bust through that with playfulness. Make some weird noises. Just start there. Make it ugly. Make it ugly for a while. And then you're like, okay, all right, now I'll try.
Yeah. I love that so much. I feel like when it blocks up for me here, it really is all about the mind getting in the way of the flow. And as you're describing how the sound moves through the body, it's like so validating for my inner child as I was grew up in competitive choirs and things like that. And you're describing how I knew to hit the note that I was being asked of in like a 5-part harmony is because I could feel it. I could feel the piano playing and then I could feel it moving through my body and it matched. The resonance was true there. And then also just for a moment, bringing it back to the fascia and the nervous system. I also, when I was very young, I had chronic asthma. And so breathing was very, very challenging for me. Just throughout the day, I just couldn't take deep breaths. And I learned that when I sang, it was a whole different story. And so anytime I would be out at the ocean or in the forest or have like by myself, right? Or have the house to myself, which was not very common because I have 7 siblings, but I would take the opportunity to lie down on the ground and take deep breaths and move sound through my body because I could breathe well for hours after I did that. It was improving my breath and it was also improving my nervous system. I wasn't so panicked about, am I going to have an asthma attack? Like if I go run and play with the kids, will I need my inhaler? That kind of thing. And so it's the breath and the sound and the fascia, they are tools for our instrument. And it's so important for us to connect in with that. Yeah.
I hope that you'll start singing more. I really do. And I feel like with Otis, like if Otis was nervous about singing in front of you, right? How would you encourage him through that? And it's like, just be playful, reestablish the playfulness of sound. And like you, Sheena, I used to go outside and sing. That's been my therapy since I was a kid. And I didn't know that's what I was doing, but I would just climb a tree and sing songs at the top of my lungs. And whatever happened that day, whatever process happened, like, school as a kid, it's just overwhelming. And then you just climb down from that tree and everything was okay, right as rain.
Exactly. It's better than
Dr.
therapy.
Yeah, Dr. Emoto has his Hado clinic in Japan, right? And he does the water ceremonies. I'm sure you two ladies are very familiar with his work, but he requires everyone to sing songs when you go to his and he's like, I don't care if you sing bad, you have to turn the cells of your body back on. You have to structure them yourself. So if we looked at singing as this construct, right? So we have the fascia, which is like, to me, the strings of the body. It's what's holding tension or flow within the body. Then we have the breath, which is almost how we're playing the tension levels of the fascia. So if we're breathing shallowly, everything we're doing is going to be a little shallow or a little fast. If we're breathing deeply and slowly, everything we do is going to have this imbued presence of strength and rhythm, And you can take anything. Take walking your kid to school in the morning. If you're breathing at 30 breaths a minute during that walk, your brain waves are probably pretty elevated. If you can take that same walk and breathe 15 times a minute, your brain waves are going to be in a different place. It's going to allow you to literally see things that you didn't see before, the birds, the butterflies, the direction of the wind. And when we add sound just sound is the untapped space. I mean, it's important. Cymatics is important. Us making sounds that are beautiful is important. Us singing to ourselves. I had this experience last night. We're experimenting with drums for the record, and Rustin has about 50 drums I can choose from, and we were trying to determine which one has the depth of sound. So we laid each other down and we played the drums over each other's body. And where I've been that day, I had trained really hard. I did fascia flow. I did a gymnastic series. And where I had worked my fascia the hardest, I could feel the vibration of the sound so much deeper. So he's playing over my body, and I feel like I have pretty good sensation. And then when he got to over my upper legs, which is what I had worked so hard that day, it was like I could feel 4 inches under my skin, the sound waves. And as we explored, I mean, he has an incredible ear. So I was describing to him, I'm like, wow, I could really see the shape of the sound. So like with my eyes closed, I was like, okay, that's a synthetic drum head. And it feels like it's too tight, and then the sound wave is shallow and it's only piercing my body for 1 inch. The buffalo drum goes 3 inches under my skin, and it's a damper. It's like literally, I kept using the word penetrating, and he was making fun of me. He's like, why are you using that word? I'm like, literally, the sound is penetrating my body. He's like, stop saying it. It's weird. And then I was like, okay, well, you lay down and I play. I'm like, so describe the feeling. And he's like, you're right. Penetrating is the proper word. The buffalo drum penetrates the body at like a 3 Gauss. So like we measure magnets by Gauss. It's like how strong their toroidal field is around them that pulls things together. And I think that sound and magnetics have a lot of overlap. And a real curious thing, just in general, like when you're setting up a PA system for an event, you have these giant, I have a huge PA, and it can span, let's just say 200 feet, so that we know, okay, this is the cone, this needs to reach everybody. So we face the speakers that way. And recently they have these, speakers that come out and they're in a different shape and they're throwing the sound. You can see these in your little Wonder Booms, like the little portable speakers. It's like there's speakers on every edge and they're throwing the sound waves out in every direction. And that's what we're seeing in the electromagnetic frequency devices. So like the EE rooms have these linear boxes that are emitting the frequency like my speakers do in one direction. You have to be within those directions. And then now they're throwing those electromagnetic frequency currents through toroidal shapes, just like they did with speakers. So like when we play with sound and we play with how sound jumps off of corners and in stairwells and our bodies, we actually are starting to understand how magnetics are working. And it creates more of a relationship to how things are actually bouncing off of each other. I don't know how we got there, but we got there.
I love that we got all the places, and there's many more we could go.
Yeah, because even in that conversation around the magnetics, I'm now seeing connections to what we talk about in, you know, different communities as manifestation and the resonance and I'm not going to go into that right now, but there's more. I think there's more as we tune our instruments, right? We become the powerful attractor that we're meant to be.
I don't know about you, but
Like the antenna.
Yes. We want a healthy, there's this word that I love. One of my mentors, he says power is wisdom. It's not just about power, it's using the power wisely. And I feel like many of us that are, going to be starting to tap into these different frequencies more consistently because we're looking at the body like a radio tower. We're starting to play with sound. Um, it's all about using it with wisdom. I don't know about you ladies, but I'm sure that you've seen this too. I've had some very powerful people in my life that have set manifestations, made them public with me, and then I watched them happen. And one of my dearest friends in the whole world, she created a whole life for herself. Everything she wrote, she got in 8 months. And she used the sunrise. So she went to the sunrise every single day for 8 months and asked the universe for this list of things: the man, the tiny house, the living life on a road and an adventure. And she beat that drum consistently for about a year. And I watched her do it. And then the eclipse came. And this was like 4 or 5 years ago. The day of the eclipse, her and her boyfriend got into a motorcycle accident and he passed away immediately. And she lived, and she blipped out. She went to the other side and chose to came back. And her and I constantly talk about, like, wow, you did exactly what you wanted, but was it what was meant for you? And her and I have had fascinating discussions about manifestation is real, the tools work, but what if we just ask for harmony? What if we just ask to be in the place that we're supposed to be? Maybe we don't even know what's best for us. So as we turn these powers on, I I feel like like my caution is wisely. We use it wisely. We use the power with harmony. We don't just do it nilly-grilly for anything that we choose or we want. Like, that's great. I like to make negotiations with the universe a lot, where I'm like, hey, I really want this, but I want this in harmony. I want this at the right time. And I promise I'll be on my best behavior if you give it to me. If you bless me with this, I promise I will be very responsible. And that's how I look at my manifestations now. It's a collaboration between me and the universe, and I am under no illusion that perhaps what I think is best for me is not. So I love creating those openings in the manifestation of, and it's from my watching my best friend do it, doing the magic, creating the magic, and then having it all ripped away so quickly. It was like a beating of a drum. So, okay, like if you keep beating the drum with the things you want, the drum will bring you what it is you're asking for. But what if we just aligned ourselves with the drum? What if we just aligned ourselves with our highest good, with our highest harmony, with our best life? Like, what comes from that, Just food for thought.
No, I agree with that too. And that's why when, in conversations around manifestation, I tend to really tune in, and we've had this conversation a lot on this podcast already, is tune into the desire that's already fulfilled within us, as in the heart knows and the mind doesn't. The mind is meant to learn. Like, we are leading in a new way, and we can allow the mind to learn along with us, which means that I may create this story about what it is that I want, but that might not be what is the highest and best good for me and everyone connected to me. And so when I tune into what I truly want, which is that feeling, that resonance of something that is truly good for all parts of all people co-creating, all elements co-creating in that manifestation, I can't create that with my mind because it doesn't exist yet. And so it is about like surrendering a bit and allowing miracles that are maybe hard to describe at the moment, and not attaching to expectations of what that is.
Yeah, that's
And
beautiful.
that means we get to shift. We get to shift and pivot with that, what we're manifesting. It's not locked into one thing. And that also works for my mind, because I'm somebody who really doesn't like to be boxed in to anything.
Yeah, I understand that.
It's like when the breath is deep, when the fascia is flowing, when the brain states are, in response to that, and we're in this coherent system, then that, the spiral of the heart creates our harmonized electromagnetic field. And it's what
Mm.
comes into it is a matter of like what is resonant, and it doesn't become a story about, what is resonant with my ego construct. It's what is resonant with this whole vibrating, like shimmering system. And it's like the holism that occurs when all of those things are happening in harmony. It almost like eradicates the ability, or this is what I'm finding in myself, is that like the paradigms in which I was able to relate to things from a space of mind are just no longer available. Like the more that, and again, these are, like you said earlier, it's like I experience it as a blip. I'm not, maintaining these states for long periods of time, hopefully longer and longer as I take your courses. But yeah, this, kind of just incompatibility when your system is in harmony with realities that do not serve the whole. And so it's, becomes less about just me, Alyssa, and more about, me as an organism that is part of this, larger cosmic, macro organism that is, also harmonizing with me and my little system, and it's a fascinating dance. I love how you weave all of this together, Brooke, and like speak just so cleanly to the science, but yeah, there's just so much that shimmers out of how you share, and so many invitations to experience ourselves and in new ways. And so I'm so grateful that you've shared your gifts with us here today.
Absolutely. If any of your audience is called, I provided you some freebies for them, but I do have digital courses. Right now they're available for lifetime. So if anyone buys them, they have access forever. I'm probably going to change that in a couple years or so, but and then I also have the Gamma Seeker library that I just released. It's 150 videos. It includes like 60% more on the fascia, 60% more on the breath. And then I started to build out the slow brainwave frequencies. So I kind of invented this instrument that allows me to breath cue without words. It allows me to use sound. And when we use sound instead of words, the brainwave state can drop way deeper. Words kind of keep us in this language protocol. Um, so I started it on there. I have quite a bit, but I'm really excited about this new album because I don't know what kind of what kind of meditations you ladies listen to, but I'm over it. I'm over the looped binaural beats that don't seem to take me anywhere. I'm over these compressed frequencies that I'm really like kind of unsure of. There's no authentic sounds made in it. So instead of whining about it, I'm just gonna, fix the problem and come out with a great album. But I'm hoping that we can all start to experience sound meditations in conjunction with the fascia work, in conjunction with our breath, and start to blip into these different states and then share notes. Because there is a sequence. There's going to be a sequence to gamma. We might have to, spinal twist in order to get both hemispheres of the brain online for 10 minutes first. We may have to drop from a 4 breath a minute to a 1 breath a minute for a period of time, but there's going to be an equation. And there's this book written by Jeff Strong. It's like, barely published. And he's a musician, a drummer that's been playing with time signatures in different rhythms on autism and ADD kids. And he tracked his case studies so diligently. And me and Rustin have been playing with these time signatures for drumming that you never kind of hear in modern music, like 21/16 is a time signature, like kind of only found in samba music. And by playing with those, with the instrument that I built, with soundscapes behind it, I think that we're going to end up coming across something. It might take us a couple albums and we might get it right off the bat, but it's been really fun to explore setting up the rhythms in an equation and saying, okay, how much? How do we get both hemispheres of the brain active and alive? And then what frequencies do we have to play? And with the fascia tension being palpated and fluid and the breath rate being low, where do we have to sit? And I'm excited. The research and the experimentation is underway, and give me a year, but keep playing with me, keep like sharing notes. Like Sheena, your information about the electromagnetic frequency devices the other day is a real treasure nugget for me. And it's in little exchanges like this that, the treasure nuggets start to come together and we feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I feel like in these conversations, the dawn of new life is right here. Breaking of systems that is happening in every corner of the world. There is religion is being destroyed, allopathic medicine is being destroyed. People are looking at governments and news propaganda very, very differently right now. And in that destruction, we can get caught up in the chaos, right? Or we can just keep focusing on solutions. And in chaos, the solution bringers are the ones that can maintain peace, calm, and lightheartedness amongst it. They're the ones that are going to be able to see the lights at the end of the tunnels when everybody just sees destruction. And forgive me, when we can hold the calm, that peace within the chaos, we will see the creative solutions that no one else is seeing. And it's important. It's important that people know how to drop into the calm state amongst the chaos. And in each little community, we need the beacons to do that. And if we can have each beacon know the sequence, okay, all hell breaks loose, what do? They know how to drop into their breath. They know how to access this radio tower of infinite information within us and allow the creative mechanism of the mind to see the solution, because we have so many answers within us. But when we are operating in high brainwave states, high stress states, high beta waves, we're only going to use the programs that are in there. We're only going to see the same solutions that we've used. So to bring it full circle, the Gamma Seeker Library is for, it's a community of people that are going to be exchanging these tools and then sharing notes along the way. And then that's where I'm going to be actively posting my research and my experimentations. That's why I'm going to kind of draft some things out and be like, okay, guys, listen to this. Let me know how it goes. So I'm excited about being in the midst of a community with the same intent, because our brains are quadruple as powerful as we're operating within them right now. And I feel like we just got to get the bodies in alignment and then start exploring sound and rhythms, and we'll figure it out.
Yes. Amazing. Yes, I love how playful you are in your sharing, and we will definitely link all of Brooke's courses and our little goodie codes in the show notes for all to enjoy as well. Well, I think without further ado, thank you so much. I hope you'll come back on again. I feel like we could talk another hour and a half.
I would love to. Please invite me back. I try to do at least one a week. So please have me back.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, ladies.